The FDA could be giving its full approval of the Pfizer vaccine by the end of the month. Remember, right now, those vaccines available for COVID, they only have emergency approval use. The hope is once they get the full approval, more people will get vaccinated. And we are joined by Michael Wolf, an expert on health literacy and communications at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. Good afternoon to you. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining me. Such an important topic. Okay, so first, if you can walk us through why these recent vaccines have not received full approval just yet, even though millions of people have already been vaccinated.
Well, I think that there's the emergency authorization use that has been used oftentimes for products when there's a imminent public health threat. So that's what we've been under for the past several months since December when Pfizer was first released. And yet the FDA still kind of goes through its safety protocol to make sure that it gets a full review of the data before giving its full approval. And so that's what's been happening and what we're expecting to see in the next few weeks, at least with the Pfizer vaccine.
Okay, and that's interesting because so many people have been vaccinated now, and obviously these drugs went through testing before, these vaccines went through testing before, but now even more people have been vaccinated. So what's the likelihood these all will be approved, and what kind of comfort can people take from knowing that millions have gotten this and seem to be doing fine?
I think that people should have a lot of confidence in the vaccines, and also that the FDA is not cutting corners and making sure that it does bring in expert review to look at the data coming from the vaccine trial, not only from the vaccines being used right now and the data that we're capturing on the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines as they've been, put into arms. But so I think that getting the full approval means a lot in terms of giving kind of a thumbs up on its safety and effectiveness. So hopefully that'll help turn the corner a bit and help us get us closer to that herd immunity.
So let's talk about some of the reasons people have chosen not to get vaccinated. What do you know?
Well, there's, a lot of diversity in terms of people's kind of concerns about the vaccine or why they're not getting it. A new Kaiser survey that came out just yesterday morning, I think really highlights that a good number of people who haven't yet been vaccinated may not be turned by the FDA's approval because they still don't think that the pandemic is a serious threat, that it's been overblown in the media. And then there's another set of people, I think, that are kind of watchful waiting. They're really wanting to know what the FDA is going to say, is it safe, and also the reasons why we think that it's safe. So I would call them, they're hesitant, they're not completely taking the vaccine off the table, but they just want to know more information. So it's going to be really important for us to communicate why we know that it's safe, why we know that it's effective to that group. And then I think there's also just these general persistent issues around misinformation that is still floating about that is leading people to believe a bunch of conspiracies and other issues that are making people concerned about the vaccine. And I'm not sure the FDA approval will necessarily swing those minds either. But I think for those who really want to know more guarantee that there's safe and effective vaccines available, that I think that this is going to be a big game changer.
And let's talk about how much of a difference do you make? Because you just broke them down into categories. How much of a difference do you think, I don't know if the Kaiser study showed any of that, what kind of difference, if any, will full approval make?
Well, I think for half of the people that haven't been vaccinated, at least from the Kaiser survey, you're probably not going to see that the FDA full approval is going to make a difference. That, there's been a lot of, the vaccine has become politicized, so a lot of these individuals are not interested in the vaccine, even if their employer mandates it. And so I think, which is what I think some people are thinking is going to happen if we get FDA full approval, is that employers, schools will be able to provide a mandate, since there is some precedence in the past for public health, imminent public health threats that we've seen. But for as many as half, that may not make a difference. There may just be a small proportion of individuals, and maybe that'll be enough to at least get us inching closer to that 80% of Americans immunized so they can actually get herd immunity. Maybe that'll be enough. We don't really know. But it is very clear from the recent survey that a large proportion of people not vaccinated are not probably going to get swayed.
Okay, so how long before the other vaccines get full approval? Do you see this happening? We're talking about Pfizer at the end of the month, and then what next?
I believe Moderna and J&J are inching closer to go after full approval as well. So I'm not sure what the current status is for those, but my guess is once we get Pfizer through, that the others will probably move very, very quickly as well. So we'll have multiple vaccines that will have full approval, and hopefully that'll do whatever it can to inch us closer to where we need to be.
Right. It'll be interesting to see the change after that, both on mandates and how many people choose to finally get it. Michael Wolff, Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.